So we're doing something a little bit different today, and I want to put two things forward at the very, very top of this video because of that. One, this is a sponsored video. FLAMMA reached out to me a few months back inquiring if I would like to review any of their stuff, and I responded by basically saying, hey, let's do something more than just a simple pedal review. But two, I want this to still be very much an honest and unfiltered exploration of the stuff that they sent me. So they are sponsoring this video. They did not give me any notes on what to talk about. I am not showing them this video before it goes live. And I'm not really going to pull any punches one way or the other because of that sponsorship. So just kind of hold those two things in your head, which is what I try to do during the process of making this video. So you can tell we're doing something a little bit different today. Typically on this channel, we'll do one of two things usually. It'll be a gear review, specifically a single piece of gear, a pedal, a guitar, an amp, or whatever, where we kind of focus on that one thing in the context of writing music and kind of a larger pedal board. Or two, we'll be looking at kind of a concept or a principle or whatever on this channel. If you've seen my wet dry wet rig video, my how I use my Morningstar MC8 video, or my guitar.com masterclass on building ambient guitar tone, you'll know what I'm talking about. And with that last video, one of the pieces of feedback I got the most on that video were comments about the cost of that overall board. Writing ambient music with a perceived to be, $5,000 board. I don't think that's what that board costs, but you know what I mean, hyperbole aside. I get a lot of comments about that and or questions about the concept of approaching ambient guitar for the first time on a budget. I want to start writing ambient music. I don't know where to start, and I can't shell out the money for a microcosm, a Mercury 7, a CXM, a Preamp Mark II, all of these kind of hype pedals that have larger price tags. And honestly, this is something that has been bouncing around in my head since I started really kind of amassing the gear collection that I have here. I'm very, very fortunate and lucky to be able to use the stuff that I use, but I've tried to hold that concept in my head, and I've been wanting to do a video on kind of intro to ambient guitar on a budget kind of thing. How to write and arrange ambient guitar without breaking the bank. So when FLAMMA reached out, I kind of saw this golden opportunity. So let's talk about the gear they make and how it can be used for this purpose. So when FLAMMA reached out initially asking if I wanted to review anything from their lineup, I pitched them this video idea, and I was very happy that they were on board with it. And so I basically just went through their list and kind of picked out the stuff that I thought I would need as the essentials of an ambient pedal board. If I am building something from scratch, what are the things that I absolutely need to get off the ground and to get writing? And there's a couple things that I look for in that process. The first is, and if you've seen my ambient guitar masterclass with guitar.com, you'll know what this is, which is good, dry guitar tone. I've said this before, and I will say it forever. Ambient guitar is less about reverb than you think it is. It's about changing your guitar's pick attack and kind of the general attack and decay of the notes in your playing. And it's about having really good dry guitar tone that can act as a base and a backbone to keep some structure and clarity alive in your writing. And number two, and this is for me, is stereo image. It is really important to me when I'm writing and arranging for ambient music that I have access to good stereo image pedals. I can get by with mono delays and stuff, but stereo cab sims and stereo reverbs are key and crucial to being able to write effectively for me. So let's talk about what I got from FLAMMA and how they tie into exactly what we're talking about. First things first are these two pedals. This is the digital preamp from FLAMMA, and this is their cab sim. And these are, as you heard on that intro, very good. I was really, really happy with my dry guitar tone using these two pieces. The Fender and the AC30 models in the preamp are great. They have great clean tone, great body, great presence, all of that stuff. The cabinets are shockingly good. The low cut is really useful. Having a level control on your output is deeply helpful as well. There's even this little latency control that allows you to dial in some stereo width, which I don't think I used very often. We'll touch on it as we get into the sound samples, but the fact that you can do unmatched cabinets with Haas effect latency applied to one side, and then you can also kick up the level on the other side to keep them feeling even, makes this a surprisingly versatile cab sim. And there's a USB port on the top because you can arrange and manage and set all of your presets and cab sim combinations through a desktop editor that FLAMMA has for this pedal. Here's the thing, stereo cab sim, digital preamp with 7 different amps and 7 different preset slots that you can save amp models to. These are $75 each. Everything on this board, except for the drive, which is cheaper, is $75. Like, you can get them on Amazon. You can also get them from like a good store. It really is a trip how good these are for the price. And I think that's important to kind of acknowledge. Like, do I think that these outperform some of my go-to amp cabinet combinations that I have in my studio? Not necessarily. For me, that's mostly because I don't feel like the gain on these sits the way that I would like them to. But for clean tone, this holds its own very, very well. Now I'll say we're gonna get to our sound samples in a minute here. And the preamp specifically is something that we are only going to touch on 3 modes in. Slots 1 and 2 are Fender and AC30 models. They have really great cleans at lower gain settings. The AC30 breaks up a lot faster than the Fender does. But from 3 on down, you get into higher gain amp models. Number 3 is called Coral, and it's based on a 2-rock amp. And it breaks up very early and actually sounds pretty good. Like I was really happy with the gain on that one. But as you get farther down into like the Marshall amp models and stuff, you kind of lose me a little bit. But that's not what we're here looking at. We're looking at ambient guitar, clean guitar tone, and whether or not you have a solid backbone to arrange music on. And honestly, at $75, this does that really well. And likewise with the cabinet, the first, I think, 4 slots in this thing are different Fender amp cabinets. Like, that's all I want in this situation. It'd be great to be able to choose like mic types and everything, which you can't, but you do have a bunch of presets that you can save. You can set the switch to, instead of toggling the pedal on and off, you can set it to rotate through your 7 presets that you can arrange, like I said, on your computer if you want to. I like to keep Fender cabinets with a Fender style preamp on something like this. The fact that I can unmatch 2 different Fender cabinets on here is really, really cool. The fact they have 4 of them is like no joke. And lastly, we have like I think it's like a $30 tiny little delay pedal from FLAMMA, just called the Drive. And you've got overdrive, volume, tone, and then warm and hot. And it's okay. It's a tiny drive. It overdrives. It's nothing to write home about. It might be right for somebody, but if you've been following me for any amount of time on this channel, or especially over on Instagram, you know how finicky I am about what I want in an overdrive, and this is just not the right voicing for me. We'll cover it a little bit in the video, but this is not going to be the like MVP of this video, like something like the delay or the reverb or the preamp would be. So we're going to start things off with what I like to call a like simple startup sound, which is essentially my Squier Jazzmaster into the Fender preamp mode, no modulation, a simple tape delay, simple hall reverb, and a set of matched 65 deluxe 1x12 cabinets in the cab sim. Very simple, very straightforward, and a really good starting place. If you've watched my video on how I build ambient guitar tone and why it's less about reverb than you think, you'll know that one of the biggest things I emphasize in that video is having good dry tone as a starting place. Sloppy, not good, clean guitar tone will make you rely more heavily on your delays and your reverbs. And one of the things that FLAMMA has done really well here is a well-designed, clean Fender amp bass and good responsive cabinets. And very versatile too. There's actually some decent grit that you can find in these things. This is the bridge mode, by the way. Bridge pickup. And back to middle. And it's very touch responsive too, which I really like. And the cabinets actually have a lot of versatility to them too. The low cut is incredibly potent. I like to keep it just above 0 just to kind of like carve out some of the crap in there. You've also got some latency that you can apply to either side to create some like big stereo width. Whenever you're doing that Haas effect, stereo widening type of thing, it makes me grateful that there's a level control on that cab pedal, because you can hear kind of that left channel starts to feel very dominant because the right channel is being delayed. And turning it down a little bit just kind of solves for some of that, to my ears at least, while still giving you that width. All right, let's jump over to the AC30 mode in this thing. So what I've got here is an AC30 cabinet on one side and a Fender twin cab on the other. And I think that twin cab actually kind of helps reintroduce some more pleasant mid-range stuff that I think is a little bit lost on the AC30 cabs if I was to use them on both sides of that cab sim. found that the AC30 breaks up in this thing a lot quicker than the Fender does, but that it's still one of the only two models that can kind of fairly be called low gain. From here on out, you'll hear mostly like really high gain amp models in here, which is not really what we're after in this video. Oh, and for context, the gain is actually down around 2 in this preset. So here's what it sounds like closer to noon on the AC30. And we'll take a look at one of the preamp, kind of higher gain preamp modes on this thing based off of a 2-rock choral. So we're not going to use this a bunch in this video, obviously, but I will say that it is a really surprisingly pleasant and usable flavor of digital amp drive, which I think is rare and hard to come by. Let's get back to the Fender mode. Before we move on to modulation, let's actually take a look at this little FLAMMA drive right here and hear how it sounds and see if we can't dial something nice in the Fender amp mode. It's all right. It's not my favorite drive I've ever played, but it's not unusable. Let's move on though. Next up is this stereo modulation pedal, which again is $75 for a stereo modulation pedal with presets and 11 different effects in it. And there are some legitimately good sounding effects in here. The chorus in this thing is exactly what you want from a chorus. It's got that classic 80s lushness to it that I really like. There is a stutter in here that I think is amazing. I'm not gonna say that it holds up against like the classic like Boss Slicer, but I mean, as far as multi-effects with a stutter go, I have no complaints about this one. It sounds great. The tremolo in this thing is really good. It's wide sounding. It has that great stereo image. And there's this thing called the duty control that as you turn it up, gets really kind of like punctuated and very like sharp sounding in a really kind of like unique and interesting way. There's a lot of good in this modulation pedal. Oh, and the last one I want to talk about in this part of the video is do not sleep on the bit crusher in this thing. Bit crushers are hard to get right, and somehow this one did. There are a lot of modes in this thing. I think there are 11 different engines in here. We're not going to touch on all of them. Like, I don't think we're really going to dive into the sample and hold and that kind of thing. But there are a bunch of really good classic sounds in here that I think are worth taking account because, again, like we discussed earlier, this is a $75 stereo modulation pedal that does a lot of things really well. Let's start things off with that chorus. The tremolo on this thing I think is really interesting. Control 1 is something called duty, D-U-T-Y, that I effectively assume, that I essentially assume just represents progressively moving it from a sine wave over to a really like sharp square wave. And it kind of gives you some really interesting tremolo sounds. So let's give it a listen. I am a sucker for a really, really slow phaser. That mix control can make it pretty aggressive. But the stereo width that it provides you is really something nice. We'll jump back to the phaser for a second just because it feels wrong to do phaser but not flanger. So this is a weird square wave modulator called Liquid. I mean, it's essentially sample and hold, but with a little bit of deviation. But the stereo image on it is quite cool. All right, and here we are at one of my favorite modulation modes in this thing, in the FS05. This is like a stutter tremolo instead of like a traditional tremolo. And so you've got like a really sharp square wave sound. And no matter how subtle you set it, it still has like a nice stuttery effect. And I really, really like it. I find it to be a really great percussive element in like song arranging. And let's wrap things up over here by taking a look at the bit crusher. I think bit crushers are hard to get right, and I am earnestly really impressed with how this one sounds. There are some easy to find great sounds in it, very cool lo-fi stuff. Moving next to their stereo delay pedal. This thing is fascinating because it has a tape delay in it, but then from there on out, you're mostly getting really interesting experimental delays in this thing. Like for context, the names of the engines in this thing, number one is tape. And after that, we're dealing in liquid, rainbow, galaxy, things like that. We're not doing analog delay, digital delay, multi-tap, that kind of thing. We're not dealing in normal delays here. We are dealing in experimental ambient delay in this pedal. This, I think, might be the heart and soul of this FLAMMA ambient board. The galaxy delay on this has chorusing on tweak 1, and tweak 2 is a slow gear applied to your repeats, which gives you these kind of like pulsating, slowly fading in chorused delay repeats that sound really great. Rainbow has the stutter effect applied to the repeats, plus a pitch shifter. There's some great stereo width on these. There's not a lot of ping-ponging, but there are some really great wide modulations applied to the repeats on this thing. And the low bit delay mode on this has a bit crusher applied to the repeats and a slow gear applied to your entire signal, giving you big, slow, crunchy swells that I think just sound very good. We'll very specifically take a look at those in a little bit and you'll hear what I'm talking about. The first one up here is a simple, straightforward tape delay. The tweak 1 is tone, and tweak 2 is a combination of like vibrato modulation and stereo width that can actually be incredibly useful. You can keep it at minimum for a nice focused delay. With like full repeats. You can really crank that tweak up and like low pass it, or high pass it, so that you've got like thinner aged tape repeats. For some reason, that tweak affects the dry signal too, which is strange. But I like the character of the full repeats anyways, so we're not really going to dwell on it. See, that stereo width actually feels great. One of the nice things about this thing too is you actually do have a tap tempo. If you hold down the bypass switch, the save select switch will start flashing blue instead of red, and then you can tap in your tempo. And you've got pretty long delay times. So this is called Liquid, and it's a delay with a phaser placed into it. This is a delay called Liquid, and it has a modulation engine in it that's somewhere between that sample and hold thing we touched on earlier and a phaser. So think of like a phaser with some weird like square wave stuff thrown in for good measure and ambient coolness. Okay, this one is really interesting. You have stutters and pitch shifts in the delay line. Tweak 1 is the stutter similar to the modulation engine we played with earlier of the same name. And tweak 2 is the kind of like pitch interval. See, a lot of that doesn't really work for me. That pitch shifting can be a little artifact heavy, as you can hear. Let's bring in some reverb and kind of play with that as an ambient concept right there. It's a really cool, very, very unique texture. Okay, so this is the Galaxy mode on the delay, and to my ears, this is one of my favorite ambient tones, ambient tone generators in this pedal. Tweak 1 is a slow gear applied only to the delay repeats, and tweak 2 is chorusing. So let's give a listen to the core delay sound and then start bringing in some of that ambient goodness. I mean, right off the bat, that's just really good delay tone. So you could use that by itself for kind of that classic. But then you bring in that slow gear. You can really hear the attack from your like the start of your note. Your pick attack really falls apart and disappears there. Kind of creates like a pulsating thing, which I really like. And again, in the context of ambient, so this is a mode that I really like and have used a lot, kind of very naturally, in trying to get to know this pedal more. This is a reverse delay that has a stereo flanger built into it, so it's really cool, soupy reverse delay textures. And here we have kind of the last of the real delay modes. Mode 8 in this thing is actually an 80-second looper. So this is the last proper delay. And this is one of my favorites because it has that same slow gear we heard earlier, but applied to your dry signal as well. And then it has a bit crusher on the second thing. So we'll play with the bit crusher and then we'll come in and we'll introduce the slow gear. I will say it'd be really nice if minimum wasn't still reasonably bit crushed as it is. And lastly, we have the FSO2 stereo reverb, which is exactly what it sounds like. This is a $75 stereo reverb with 7 slots with 7 different effects, and you can save a preset to each of them. So you basically have 1 preset per type of reverb. You have your low and high cut, you have your decay, and you have your pre-delay. All basics, and this is not nearly as experimental and weird as the delay is. But what this is a reverb that actually kind of covers all the ground that you would need. You have room, hall, cave, plate, spring, all the basics that you would need in a reverb pedal if you're building an ambient board. Especially, stereo reverbs do not tend to come cheap, and they tend to either be very, very feature lacking or big box reverbs, things that have tons of stuff in them. And this cuts through the middle of those perfectly. You have 7 different modes. You have really good stereo image. You have a ton of sounds in it. We'll dive into all the sounds here in a bit. This is one of the only pedals in this video that we will take a look at, I think, every single engine in. But that's because there's nothing to skip on this one. You're not gonna get something great out of every single mode in this, in my opinion. You're not going to find something that you love in every single delay mode. You're not gonna find something you love in every single version of the modulation in the modulation pedal. But if I had to pick like a standout for this, like I said, the delay is probably the ambient heart and soul in terms of kind of creating unique textures and everything. But in terms of pure utilitarian usefulness, this $75 reverb is no joke. Stereo reverb is such a crucial thing. I can survive on a mono delay with a stereo reverb. I don't know that I can survive on mono reverb alone in life. And at $75, I think that this is one of the most impressive showings on this board in FLAMMA's lineup. So let's just do some quick run-throughs of what makes the reverbs in this thing so impressive. And the answer is just, there's a bunch of them and they all sound really good. So let's dive in and let's start with the room. We'll dial in something subtle and then we'll see kind of how big it can get and kind of see where that versatility lives. So we've been on the hall for most of the video, at least during these sound samples, and you can hear why. Great diffusion, great little bit of splash at the top, a really good sounding stereo hall reverb. So this is what they call church, which is kind of a cathedral. It's big, open, ambient reverb that has a slight shimmer. I think the plate on this is actually quite good. So it's simple. It's a plate. Let's listen to it. Oh, we will in a second. This is not plate. This is it sounded too big. This is cave, which is has a lot more low end and a different. You can hear that a much rounder splashing effect than things like the cathedral. do like how much darker this one is. It reminds me of the E-dome in the Collider from Source Audio. Now it's time for plate. And here we are on spring. So there's no drip to be found in the spring here. You know, apologies to Ryan Burke for that. But it actually kind of can work as an interesting different texture for ambient verb if you really crank that delay. actually really like that. I think that's a great texture for like big washy ambience, a little bit more splash in it. And to close out the reverb pedal, we have Mod, which is a reverb with modulation added to it. So who is this stuff for? And I think that that answer is very, very easy. It is both for somebody who wants to get started writing ambient music, is not sure where to begin, and doesn't want to break the bank figuring out what they want. And I think that's really important. Rather than going out and buying one hyper-specific thing like the Chase Bliss Audio Thermae, when you don't even know if you want pitch-shifted repeats or not, or hard committing to like the Strymon Volante before you know if tape delay is the flavor that is right for your writing. These kinds of things will give you a lot of sounds to work with while you figure out where you want to kind of like nail down your tone more specifically as you move forward. And aside from just beginners, I think this is very useful for somebody who is missing something. There's a gap in their board. I get so many messages from people saying, hey, here's what I have in my signal chain right now. What would you recommend adding? And I so often have to kind of go, well, what do you think you're missing? What do you think isn't there that you need in your signal chain? What sound is not a color you can paint with right now? For $75, to have access to 11 different effects in stereo that you can then parse out what works for you and what doesn't, this is nothing to scoff at, and this is nothing to sleep on. So, FLAMMA, these are really good, earnestly, really, really good. The stuff that works in these works really, really well. Oh, and one final just kind of amusing note before we go. I am playing a Squier J Mascis Jazzmaster for this entire video, and that is because in the spirit of budget ambient board, I didn't want to put together a board that costs less than $500 and then, you know, grab like a $2,000 guitar and be like, hey, look how good all this stuff sounds. I paid $320 for that Jazzmaster. This entire rig, all the pedals and that guitar cost less than $800 for the entire thing. And if you can find better ambient for cheaper than that, please show me, because I don't believe you.